All right, this right here is crazy. It's definitely crazy. We got to get into this. So this is an article that is basically giving us the rundown on why the owners are kind of refusing to sign off on some of the things that the WNBA players want. It points out viewpoints like them viewing it as an unstable business up to this point.
That single reaction you just observed tells you everything you need to know about where this extremely stressful negotiation is now at. The WNBA Players Association opted out of their collective bargaining agreement in October 2024, and we are now facing a potentially terrible lockout. But here's an important piece of the puzzle that has been utterly absent from almost all the coverage you've seen. We'll take a look at the owner's true perspective. I'm not talking about speculation, and I'm certainly not talking about further anonymous sources. We're discussing the genuine, hard-nosed financial reason for their refusal to move on revenue sharing. And believe me, if you see the numbers they are looking at and the dangers they are assessing, the entire stalemate begins to make a lot more sense from their perspective.
The WNBA players have quickly become some of the most recognizable female athletes in the world, with ballooning ticket sales and record-breaking viewership over the past 2 seasons. As a result, league revenues have soared. But unlike their male counterparts in the National Basketball Association, who are guaranteed 50% of the NBA's basketball-related income, WNBA players are not guaranteed a percentage of such income, which includes things like media deals, merchandise, ticket sales, concessions, so the players haven't shared in the league's flood of news.
So let's set a baseline here, because the stats are somewhat stark right now. The WNBA players receive a startlingly low 7% of league money. Let me say it again. Just 7. Meanwhile, NBA players are guaranteed 50% of all basketball-related income. That large disparity is precisely what the players are attempting to close. But this is when the entire matter becomes really difficult. Multiple major media outlets have reported on these negotiations by merely repeating the narrative that the league is not profitable, but without giving any actual financial proof to back up that allegation. For example, NBC Sports said that the WNBA has a lengthy history of being an unstable company. According to Bleacher Report, the league isn't profitable yet. Sports Illustrated issued essentially identical statements, with a common thread being that none of them mentioned any verifiable sources. The Athletic went even farther, citing unidentified sources who said the league and its teams have not been profitable since the WNBA's debut. That's 29 consecutive years of reported losses. If true, this is a stunning figure.
October, and the league has been careening toward a lockout as negotiations soured, with revenue sharing being the largest sticking point. Despite the massive amount of money coming into the WNBA, the league, which is majority owned by NBA owners, wants to keep their revenue sharing structure the same, guaranteeing far more profit for owners and investors than for the players who actually play the game. And too many news reports have catered to owners' interests when reporting on the negotiations between the players.
Now, here's a story that everyone, and I mean everyone, keeps mentioning. In October 2024, just before the CBA opt-out date, the New York Post released a shocking article suggesting that the WNBA will lose $40 million that season alone. And their source for this large figure was a single anonymous NBA executive who was cited as saying, "The WNBA owes the NBA so much that we won't see any windfall for years." That one piece, based on a single anonymous comment, has become the entire foundation for the unprofitable league narrative that is dictating these high-stakes discussions. However, the timing is important here. This report coincidentally comes just before the deadline for players to opt out of the CBA, which is an ideal opportunity for both parties to try to dominate the public narrative. Even more telling, it comes from an anonymous NBA executive with a clear financial stake in keeping player costs as low as possible.
Negotiations is profitability. Now, we've heard over and over and over again how much money these owners lose every year. Oh, we finished in the red. We're in the red. We're in the red. We're in the red. Even with the soar of Caitlin Clark, they claim to have finished in the red. They had to get everybody private jets because everybody was tripping that Caitlin Clark had them. Everybody. So that's another $50 million spent on PJs for everybody. And that was that.
Okay, let's keep researching since this is what makes the whole story so frustrating. and frankly demeaning to the players. The WNBA has completed its most successful, watched, and talked about season in its history. Caitlin Clark's emergence as a rookie resulted in absolutely record-breaking viewership and ticket sales across the league. Furthermore, many expansion teams are paying a staggering $250 million each for the pleasure of entering this apparently unsuccessful league. Think about it. Ownership groups in Portland, Toronto, and San Francisco are all signing big quarter-billion-dollar checks to join in on the fun. So you have to ask the most apparent question here. Why are billionaires lining up to invest $250 million in a corporation that purportedly loses $40 million every year? That math simply doesn't add up. Something is off. Either these highly successful investors have suddenly become lousy at business, or the financial picture is far more convoluted than the simple headline. The league loses money every year.
Everybody's jumping to throw in $250 million to get their team and all of this stuff. But hey, and then it shows here WNBA will lose $40 million this season, and its NBA investors are growing impatient. That was an article in the New York Post. And it says, when numbers regarding the league's profitability are cited in coverage of the current negotiations, the source is usually an article from the New York Post. Shortly before the deadline to opt out of the CBA in October 2024, prime time for each side try to control the narrative. The Post, Josh Cosman and Brian Lewis reported the WNBA will be losing 40.
And this is the now. Let's speak about a significant component that the team owners are absolutely contemplating in these negotiations, and it's a number that frankly worried them. When Caitlin Clark got injured during the 2024 season, the league's viewership decreased by 55%. Let that sink in. More than half of the television audience vanished as soon as she was unable to play. That is not merely a slow deterioration. This is a catastrophic instantaneous decline that is directly related to the availability of a single player. So, I want you to put yourself in the owner's position for just a second. The players are at the table, urging you to commit to a radical new revenue-sharing model that assures them a large percentage of all revenues. But you just saw your league's viewership drop in half, literally, because your best star was injured. What if she sustains a more severe injury next season? What happens if she is absent for a lengthy period of time? You would be obligated to pay out a proportion of earnings that could evaporate overnight depending just on the health of one person. From their opinion, that is not a solid foundation for a 50-50 revenue split. It's a tremendous, terrible danger that NBA owners avoid since their league's fame is spread over dozens of superstars and well-established multi-generational franchises.
Also, remember, the owners watched 55% of the viewership drop when Caitlin Clark got hurt. 55% of the viewership tanked when Caitlin Clark was injured. Got to take that into consideration. I'm sure the owners are taking that into consideration. Like, hey, what if something happened and this girl gets hurt again? We lose more than half of the viewership again? I'm sure that is.
So, with all of that risk in mind, let's speak about what the league actually offers the players. Because this is the point in the story where the owners truly believe they are being generous. The WNBA has proposed tripling player wages while keeping conditional revenue sharing agreement. On the surface, that sounds really good, right? Who doesn't want to treble their money? But, as always, there's a catch. That revenue sharing only applies if certain very specified growth targets are met. Here's the kicker. According to the league's own admission, those benchmarks have never been met in its history. Now, some of this is due to the 2020 COVID shutdown, which made meeting the targets unfeasible. However, even in years without a global epidemic, the league has routinely set these goals in a way that makes them extremely difficult, if not impossible, to meet. And this is the final nail in the coffin. Even if by some miracle the targets are met, the players only get to share in the revenue on the overage. That is, only the amount of money above the benchmark. Even then, they only receive a small portion of the overage. So, when the league tells the public that revenue sharing is included in our offer, they are legally correct. But it is a version of revenue sharing that has been carefully constructed to rarely, if ever, pay out a single dime to the player.
Yada, yada, yada. But this is them questioning the owner's stance and why they have not been transparent with documentation for the WNBPA showing the losses and all of that stuff. but it's also showing their viewpoint on why they are hesitant to commit to whatever this revenue sharing thing is. Like, the players getting 50% of the revenue sharing is not going to happen. You can forget about that. They can forget about that. That's not going to happen.
This is where the player's suspicion is not only comprehensible, but also totally justified. As the original post rightly points out, media covering this issue should examine these recommendations far more carefully and critically. You see, there's a huge fundamental difference between clean sharing, in which players receive a plain, agreed-upon percentage of all revenue, as NBA players do, and a tremendously convoluted methodology that allows the league to claim revenue sharing, when in actuality, the compensation is intended to be modest and non-existent. The owners are counting on the fact that most fans and media members will not bother to read the fine print. They can go to the public and say, "We offered to triple salaries and include revenue sharing," which to the typical person sounds really generous. But when you look at the form of that agreement, you see that the revenue sharing component may never materialize. And even with tripled salary, athletes still make only 7 to 10% of overall league revenue, which is far from the 50% that their male colleagues deserve.
So it says when the league says revenue sharing is part of its offer to the players in current negotiations, reporters ought to read that with skepticism. Does it mean players get a share of all revenue, sometimes referred as a clean sharing, like the men, or does it mean there's a complicated formula that allows the league to say they're sharing when in fact the women will get peanuts? So, listen, man, this lockout, I mean, we're getting all viewpoints, and this is just kind of showing kind of where the owners stand in all of this and why they are not looking to give the players what they want. Get down in.
So this is where we end up with this really intricate negotiation. The owners are examining what they believe to be a fundamentally shaky business model. They are seeing viewership figures that are overly reliant on only one or two top players. They are continuously referring to decades of supposed financial losses, even if those reports conveniently lack any transparent financial proof to back them up. At the same time, they are watching these expansion teams pay big nine-figure fees, indicating that the league has significant underlying worth. However, they are also grappling with a harsh fact that the NBA has been subsidizing the WNBA's operation for years. From their cold, calculated perspective, agreeing to a 50-50 revenue split right now will be nothing short of financial suicide. They honestly believe that more time is required to see whether the recent surge in growth is sustainable or if it is simply a fleeting Caitlin Clark-driven spike that will vanish as quickly as it appeared. So they are providing what they believe is an acceptable compromise, much increased wages for players, with the possibility of revenue sharing in the future provided the league can continue this new development trajectory without collapsing the moment a top player is hurt. However, there is one major flaw in the owners' calculations. Players are the product. Without them, there would be no league, no viewership, no expansion fees, and no media partnerships. The NBA did not become a global powerhouse by underpaying its players and waiting to see how the league would do. They did the reverse. They made a significant investment in their athletes. They aggressively advertised them as superstars, and they created a revenue model that rewarded everyone from the owners to the last person on the bench for working together to grow the business. The WNBA owners want the players to show the league's stability before committing to equitable remuneration. However, the players argue that they can't possibly show anything when they are only paid 7% of the revenue and can't even afford to play year-round in the United States without traveling abroad during the winter. It's the classic chicken and egg situation, and someone has to break the cycle. The owners continue to claim financial losses, but they refuse to release their accounts to prove it. They keep using the $40 million loss figure from the New York Post, although it is based on a single anonymous source with a clear motive. Meanwhile, brand new teams are paying $250 million to join, implying that the league's true value is much higher than the "we're losing money every year" narrative would have you believe. And the 55% decline in viewing when Caitlin Clark was injured might be used to argue for paying players more, not less. If your entire economic model is that weak, you must invest extensively in establishing numerous stars, deepening fan ties around more teams, and providing a product that isn't entirely reliant on one player's assistance. You certainly do not accomplish this by providing a conditional revenue sharing plan that is designed to never pay out. The players chose to opt out of the CBA because they understand that now is their most powerful time. The league just had its most successful season ever. Public interest is at an all-time high, expansion is underway, and new media deals are on the way. If they can't obtain a fair deal right now, when will the timing be better? The owners are wagering that the players will blink first and then accept the tripled salary with no actual income share. The players believe that the owners just cannot afford a lockout, which would derail all of this wonderful momentum. Someone will be correct, and someone will be completely wrong. However, it has become evident that the purpose of this negotiation is not to determine whether the league is now profitable. It's about who stands to benefit when it becomes immensely profitable in the near future. The owners want to keep all the prospective upside for themselves until they are satisfied that the expansion is sustainable. The players, on the other hand, want to share in the upside now because they are the ones on the court who are creating the value that is driving all of this expansion. So, when you see headlines about the WNBA potentially facing a lockout, I want you to know what's actually going on behind the scenes. This is not about greedy players demanding funds that the league does not have. This is a story of a group of owners who have seen the worth of their league explode and are now refusing to share that new value with the players who made it all happen. They are hiding behind accusations of unprofitability, which they refuse to back up with actual financial data, while charging new shareholders $250 million to join the party. The real question is not whether the WNBA can afford to compensate its players fairly. The question is whether the owners will do it before being compelled to. And depending on how these negotiations are going, it appears like we will all find out the hard way. So, please share your ideas in the comments. Do you believe the owners are justified in their caution, or are they simply attempting to maximize their earnings while the players do all the heavy lifting? And, more importantly, what do you believe will happen if we have a lockout? Can the league withstand losing its own momentum just as things are about to take off? Please let me know what you think, and be sure to subscribe because this narrative is far from